After homeroom ended, Chris was approached by Takuya from the soccer club. Although he was a student who came from another elementary school and was in the same class, they hadn't talked much.
You know the senior from the soccer club, Sakamoto-san, right? He said to come to the rooftop exit by the south stairs.
Me?
Chris asked, pointing to himself. Takuya nodded.
Now?
Takuya nodded again.
Why?
I don't know. Anyway, I told you. Make sure to go there.
Takuya said and left the classroom. Chris remembered that he was seen by Sakamoto yesterday while he was walking home with Sana. Chris wonders if there's something else he needs to be asked regarding Sana. Chris told his friends on the basketball club, "I was called by a senior, so I'll be a little late," and headed towards the south stairs mainly used by second-year students. On the top floor landing, Sakamoto was sitting with his legs spread wide. Behind him, there were 3 other second-year seniors. Chris recognized each of the seniors, but he didn't know their names. All 3 were looking at Chris with smirking faces. Not understanding the situation, Chris bowed his head for the time being.
Hello.
Ignoring Chris's greeting, Sakamoto came down the stairs. At a spot 2 steps above the landing where Chris is, he stopped. With arms crossed, he looked down at Chris for a moment while standing tall. He was chewing gum noisily.
Hey, you.
He said as he spat gum onto the stairs.
I've been thinking this for a while. You're damn cocky, and that long hair of yours just makes it worse. Don't get carried away, you punk.
He shouted suddenly. Chris froze in place, his heart racing like a drum. However, at the same time, Sakamoto's thoughts flowed into Chris's mind, and he understood the situation. Sakamoto was rejected by Sana, and it seemed that he misunderstood the cause to be Chris.
Excuse me.
Chris gathered his courage to speak, and Sakamoto leaned in closer.
Oh, are you talking back to me?
He was so excited that he no longer had an ear to listen. The other 3 followers had also come down the stairs and surrounded Chris.
I think there's some misunderstanding.
Chris mustered up the courage to speak again. But Sakamoto mercilessly punched him, saying, "Shut up." However, that movement looked to Chris like it was in slow motion. He quickly stepped back and calmly dodged it. Sakamoto, whose full force strike was evaded, almost lost balance and fell. Somehow managing to hold on, he turned his face bright red and charged at Chris again. Chris dodged every punch and kick that came at him one after another. Not only did it look slow, but he could also read Sakamoto's thoughts, making it surprisingly easy for Chris to evade his attacks. At the same time that Sakamoto threw a right hook, another senior attacked Chris from behind. Without looking back, Chris crouched down and dodged to the side, causing the seniors to hit each other.
Ouch.
The senior who attacked from behind shouted, holding his nose that was bleeding after being hit. On the other hand, Sakamoto, who was punched in the solar plexus, bent his body in a U-shape and writhed in pain. The other 2 seniors, who were taken aback, averted their eyes when they made eye contact with Chris.
Hey, you guys.
Miss Tagawa, looking flustered, rushed up the stairs. Maybe someone who saw the fight called for help.
Are you okay?
When she reached the landing on the 4th floor, Miss Tagawa scanned the area before slowly turning her gaze to Chris. She had an expression that suggested she couldn't quite grasp the situation. The seniors ignored the teacher, who said, "Wait," and left the scene. One leaned forward, while the other held his nose.
What happened?
Miss Tagawa asked as she picked up the gum that Sakamoto spat out with a tissue and wiped the blood that had dripped onto the floor.
No, it's nothing.
Chris replied, falling silent, and the teacher bent down to look at Chris's face.
Could you come to the staff room with me for a moment?
the teacher said in a gentle tone. Chris nodded as if he had given up.